In the late 1930s, storm clouds were gathering over Europe. Tensions were rising because of a lot of changes happening around the world. Let's break it down simply. After the First World War ended in 1918, Europe was trying to recover. Many countries were struggling with their economies, and people were unhappy. Germany was particularly affected because they were blamed for the war and had to pay a lot of money to the winning countries. This made life tough for many Germans. In this troubled time, Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany. He promised to make Germany strong again and fix its problems. He became chancellor in 1933 and quickly turned things upside down. Hitler started building a big, powerful army. That broke the rules set after the First World War, but he didn't stop there. He took control of Austria in 1938 and then part of Czechoslovakia, without much resistance from other countries. These actions made many leaders in Europe very nervous. Some of the key people involved included Adolf Hitler and the leaders of European countries like Britain and France. The British Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, tried to keep peace by agreeing to let Hitler have some territories in a move called appeasement. He hoped this would stop further aggression, but Hitler had bigger plans. Meanwhile, France was trying to figure out how to protect itself. They had built a line of fortifications called the Maginot Line along part of their border with Germany. Then, in September 1939, things reached a boiling point. Germany invaded Poland using a military technique called Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war. The idea was to attack fast and hard, using tanks and planes to overwhelm the enemy. It worked. Germany took over Poland in just a month. This sparked the start of World War II, as Britain and France declared war on Germany soon after. The technical stuff behind Germany's success included their use of tanks, airplanes, and radios to communicate quickly. Their tanks, known as panzer divisions, could move fast and hit hard. Airplanes would fly ahead to bomb key targets and give the ground troops the advantage. Radios allowed them to coordinate attacks in real time. The opposing forces, meanwhile, mostly relied on older methods and equipment. They were often too slow to react to the German tactics. As the war progressed, both sides faced numerous problems. For Germany, one big challenge was keeping up the supply lines for their rapidly advancing troops. They moved so quickly that it was tough to keep them fueled and supplied. Britain and France, on the other hand, struggled with how to best defend against these new, fast attacks. They realized their military strategies were outdated against this new style of warfare. The result of all this was that by May 1940, Germany quickly turned its attention to France and the Low Countries, like Belgium and the Netherlands. In a matter of weeks, German forces moved through these areas with ease, bypassing the defensive Maginot Line. France was overrun, and by June, Paris had fallen. This was a big shock to the world because France had been seen as a strong military power. Why does all this matter today? Understanding how these events unfolded helps us learn about the importance of adapting to new challenges. The tactics and technology used during the invasion changed the way wars were fought. It also led to worldwide repercussions and alliances that shaped the future. Knowing this history reminds us of the impact of unchecked power and the need for nations to work together to maintain peace. In the late 1930s, Europe was getting tense. Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, was expanding. They wanted more land. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and World War II began. By 1940, Germany wanted to invade France and the Low Countries, which are Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. They hoped to do it quickly using a new method called Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war in German. Blitzkrieg combined speed and surprise. It was all about moving fast with planes, tanks, and troops to confuse and defeat enemies quickly. The key people who planned this were German leaders like Hitler and his generals, such as Gerd von Rundstedt and Ewald von Kleist. Hermann Göring was important too, as he led the German Air Force, called the Luftwaffe. On May 10, 1940, the invasion began. The German military struck Luxembourg, Belgium, and the Netherlands. The idea was to bypass France's strong defenses, called the Maginot Line, a line of concrete fortifications and weapon installations along France's border. The German planes attacked first, bombing key places to cause confusion. Then, the tanks rolled in. German tanks, known as panzers, cut through enemy lines swiftly, with support from troops and airplanes. Their main tanks, like the Panzer III and Panzer IV, were equipped with powerful guns and thick armor that outmatched many of their opponents. These tanks had guns that were usually around 37 millimeters and 75 millimeters in diameter, which made them very effective. Things did not go well for Belgium and the Netherlands. They were quickly overwhelmed. The Netherlands surrendered after just 5 days, on May 15th. Belgium lasted a bit longer, but gave in on May 28th. French and British troops had rushed to help, but they couldn't stop the fast German advance. There were many problems during this invasion. The Allies, which were France, Belgium, and their friends, especially the British Expeditionary Force, had trouble coordinating. Their plans were based on slower warfare, not the rapid attacks they faced. Communication was also tough. Without quick and effective ways to share information, they struggled to respond to the Germans. By late May, the Germans had reached the coast of France. This trapped many Allied troops, who had retreated to the beaches of Dunkirk. Things seemed hopeless. However, an incredible rescue effort began, moving over 330,000 soldiers from Dunkirk back to Britain in what became known as the Miracle of Dunkirk. The results of Blitzkrieg were clear. In just 6 weeks, by June 25th, Germany had taken France and the Low Countries. France signed an armistice, giving Germany control over much of its territory. This victory showed the world how powerful and effective Blitzkrieg tactics could be. Today, understanding Blitzkrieg matters because it changed how wars were fought. It was a wake-up call about the importance of speed, technology, and adaptation in military strategy. The lessons from this approach are still studied by military planners around the world, making it a key event in history. In the spring of 1940, World War II was in full swing, and Europe was a battleground. Germany had already taken control of Poland, and now they set their sights on France and the Low Countries, which include Belgium and the Netherlands. France thought they were prepared for an attack, mainly because they had the Maginot Line, a series of strong defenses along their border with Germany. But Germany had a different plan, and it focused on a region called the Ardennes. The Ardennes is a hilly, forested area in southeast Belgium that leads into France. The French thought it would be impossible for a large army to move through the dense trees and rough terrain. They believed that any attack through the Ardennes would be slow and weak. So, they kept only a few troops there and expected the main attack to come from somewhere else. Enter a key player, Erich von Manstein, a German general with a bold plan. He suggested sending tanks and troops through the Ardennes to catch the Allies by surprise. This plan was risky, but Adolf Hitler approved it. The main goal was to avoid the strong French defenses and hit them where they least expected it. On May 10, 1940, Germany put their plan into action. They quickly invaded the Netherlands and Belgium to distract the Allies, and the real blow came through the Ardennes. German soldiers, using tanks and aircraft, moved fast and aggressively. Their tanks were called panzer divisions, and they were powerful and well coordinated. These tanks didn't travel alone. They were backed by planes called Stukas that attacked from the sky. Despite the challenging terrain, the German army pushed through with a combination of surprise, speed, and coordination. They used radios to communicate quickly, which was a huge advantage. German tanks had good armor and firepower, often using 75 mm guns that could destroy enemy defenses. The sound of their aircraft and the rumble of tanks shook the defenders who weren't prepared for such an assault. The Allies were in trouble. Their forces were too spread out, trying to defend multiple areas. Also, their communications were slow compared to the Germans. This confusion and lack of preparation made it difficult for them to mount a proper defense or counterattack. By May 14th, the German army broke through to a town called Sedan in France, which was a decisive point. The French defenses collapsed, leading to chaos behind the lines. Soon after, German troops were heading towards the English Channel, threatening to trap huge numbers of British and French soldiers. This strategy worked better than anyone in Germany had hoped. The swift fall of the Ardennes opened the road to the whole of France. Within a few weeks, France, one of Europe's major powers, was defeated. The fall of France shocked the world. The Germans used speed and surprise to achieve one of their greatest military victories. Why does this matter today? Well, it shows how thinking differently and using technology can shift the outcome of events. The fall of the Ardennes is a lesson on the importance of not underestimating an opponent and being adaptable. It changed the course of the war and reshaped Europe. Remembering it helps us understand how strategies and decisions can have huge impacts on history. In the late 1930s, things were heating up in Europe. Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, had already taken over Austria and Czechoslovakia. Everyone was on edge. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland, and that kicked off World War II. Now, in May 1940, Germany set its sights on France and the Low Countries, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. This was a big strategy move known as the Blitzkrieg, or Lightning War. The key players were Germany, Britain, and France. On the German side, there was Adolf Hitler and his top generals like Erich von Manstein. They had a plan to surprise everyone by going through the Ardennes forest, which most thought was too tough to cross. On the Allies' side, you had leaders like Winston Churchill from the United Kingdom and the French general Maurice Gamelin. They were ready to defend but didn't expect the Germans to come through the Ardennes. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched its attack. They invaded the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg at the same time. It was fast and intense. German tanks and troops zipped across the borders, while aircraft bombed key targets. This method of warfare was called Blitzkrieg. It's when you move quickly with tanks and planes to confuse and overwhelm the enemy. The Germans had a new kind of tank, the Panzer, that was strong and fast. They also had the Stuka dive bomber, a plane that could dive down on a target and release bombs with deadly accuracy. The Allies were caught off guard because they were waiting for an attack through the main border with Germany, not through the forests. The major problem for the Allies was that they didn't move as fast as the Germans. They still used older military strategies and had trouble communicating quickly. Plus, the Germans used radio to direct their units in real time. In contrast, the Allies often had to rely on older methods like dispatches, which took longer to get orders across. Another challenge was the speed of the German attacks. Many towns fell before the Allies could position themselves to fight. The Germans bypassed strong defenses and hit where the Allies were weakest. Cities like Rotterdam in the Netherlands were heavily bombed, leading to quick surrenders to avoid further destruction. As Germany advanced, the Allies had to retreat. By May 15, 1940, the Netherlands had surrendered. Soon after, Belgium was in a similar position. The German forces eventually pushed the British and French troops to the beaches of Dunkirk in France. The invasion of the Low Countries showed how important speed and surprise had become in modern warfare. This changed military tactics for the future. The results were clear. Germany gained control of the Low Countries and soon much of France, This also forced the Allies to rethink their strategies and unite even more against a common enemy. Why does this matter today? It's a big lesson in how fast things can change in conflict, and how important it is to adapt quickly. The struggle for the Low Countries showed us that being prepared and flexible can decide the outcome of a battle. And, in a larger sense, it reminds us how crucial it is to work together in tough times. A lesson that still rings true across many parts of life today. In 1940, Europe was in the middle of a big mess. World War II was tearing countries apart, and the Germans, led by Adolf Hitler, were taking over large parts of the continent. Before this period, France had put effort into defensive tactics by building the Maginot Line, a line of concrete fortifications, obstacles, and weapon installations. But it did not cover the country's border with Belgium, which turned out to be a major problem. Key figures in this scenario included Hitler, of course, who was trying to expand Germany's influence. Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, was worried about what Germany might do next. Paul Reynaud, the French Prime Minister, was dealing with major problems as the German forces moved closer. So, what happened? On May 10, 1940, Germany launched a massive attack on France and the Low Countries, which included Belgium and the Netherlands. They used a strategy called Blitzkrieg, meaning lightning war, which involved fast, powerful attacks using planes, tanks, and troops. The idea was to move so quickly that opponents had no time to react effectively. German planes targeted airfields, and their tanks, such as the Panzer divisions, rolled through the Ardennes forest, a place the Allies had thought was too dense for such maneuvers. As the Germans moved quickly through Belgium and into northern France, the Allies struggled to keep up and respond effectively. One challenge was that the Allies had not expected such fast and aggressive tactics. They had planned for a slower, more traditional type of warfare. The rapid German movement caused confusion and made it hard for the Allies to organize their defenses. Paris, the capital of France, found itself in a tricky situation. The city was packed with people, and the French government had to decide whether to stay and fight or leave for safety. By June, the German forces were closing in on Paris, and the French knew they could not hold the city. On June 14, 1940, German troops entered Paris without much resistance. The French had declared Paris an open city to avoid its destruction, meaning they would not defend it in battle. This occupation of Paris had huge effects. France signed an armistice with Germany on June 22, 1940, leading to the division of France into a German-occupied zone in the north and a so-called free zone in the south, controlled by the Vichy government. Many people in France were unhappy with this and joined the French resistance, a movement that worked secretly against the German occupiers. Why should we care about this today? Well, the occupation of Paris marked a significant point in the war. It showed how powerful the German forces were and how unprepared the Allies were for this new kind of warfare. It also set the stage for France's role in the war and influenced how other countries planned their defenses. The events of this time helped shape strategies and highlight the importance of adaptability in military planning. Understanding these events helps us learn from the past and shows us how quickly things can change in conflict. It is also a reminder of how critical decisions made during such crises can affect millions of lives and the course of history. In May 1940, things were not looking good for the Allies in World War II. German forces had launched a surprise attack, swiftly moving through Belgium and the Netherlands, and now they were pushing deep into France. The German strategy was a fast-moving assault called the Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. It involved quick attacks using tanks, planes, and troops, catching enemy defenses off guard before they could react. At this time, the British Expeditionary Force and French armies were caught by surprise. They found themselves trapped along with Belgian forces near the French town of Dunkirk, with the Germans closing in on them. For the Allies, it felt like the end was near. If they couldn't get their soldiers out of there, it would be a disaster. One of the key people in this story is Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He had just started in his role and faced a huge challenge. Churchill and other leaders had to figure out how to evacuate over 300,000 soldiers before they got captured, or worse. Meanwhile, a German leader, Hermann Göring, promised Adolf Hitler that his air force, the Luftwaffe, could bomb the trapped soldiers into surrender without the German army needing to attack. This belief gave the Allies a tiny window of time to act. The plan that came about was a massive evacuation across the English Channel, from Dunkirk back to the United Kingdom. This event is often called the Miracle of Dunkirk, and it unfolded over 9 days, from May 26 to June 4, 1940. But it wasn't just big naval ships doing the work. The British called on anyone with a boat to help. This meant fishing boats, pleasure yachts, and even small lifeboats joined in the rescue effort. All these civilian vessels became known as the Little Ships of Dunkirk. Technically, the operation was difficult. The shallow waters around Dunkirk made it hard for large ships to get close to the shore. This is where the smaller boats came in handy, acting like shuttles, moving soldiers from the beaches to the larger ships waiting further out in the sea. Facing constant attacks from German planes, pilots from the Royal Air Force fought above the beaches to protect the soldiers evacuating below. But there were many problems. The weather was tough, and attacks from the air never stopped. The roads leading to Dunkirk were filled with desperate people and abandoned vehicles. Communication was another issue, as coordinating such a huge operation was a real challenge with the technology available at the time. Despite all this, the evacuation was successful. By the end of the operation, about 338,000 soldiers had been evacuated to safety. This was far more than anyone had expected. Although the Allies had to leave behind much of their heavy equipment, the saving of so many lives lifted the spirits of the United Kingdom and its allies. This story matters today as a reminder of resilience and teamwork in tough times. The Miracle of Dunkirk shows how, even in a desperate situation, people working together can achieve something amazing. It also teaches us that in war, as in life, having hope and making bold decisions can sometimes lead to unexpected victories. In May 1940, Europe was in chaos as World War II raged on. Germany had already invaded Poland, and now set its eyes on France and the Low Countries, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. These countries were not just next-door neighbors to Germany. They were crucial for reaching France quickly. By capturing them, Germany hoped to knock out its enemies and win the war fast. This was about more than just land. It was a strategy to take control of Europe. One of the main players was German leader Adolf Hitler. He believed that a swift and intense attack could bring him victory. On the other side, leaders like French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill prepared to defend their countries. They knew they were facing a tough opponent and needed to act fast. On May 10, 1940, Germany launched its attack using a tactic called Blitzkrieg, which means lightning war in German. Imagine a powerful storm rolling in quickly. This strategy used fast-moving tanks, planes, and soldiers to surprise and overwhelm the enemy. The German army first struck the Netherlands, then moved into Belgium and Luxembourg. This was no ordinary battle. It was like a race to capture as much ground as possible before the defenders could react. The French and British had set up defenses, but the Germans had a trick up their sleeve. They moved through the Ardennes forest, an area the Allies thought was too difficult for an army to cross. This was a smart move, allowing the Germans to bypass strong defenses and catch the Allies off guard. German tanks, like the Panzer, moved quickly through terrain that was thought to be impassable. These tanks had impressive armor and speed, making them formidable opponents. They were supported by aircraft like the Messerschmitt Bf-109, which dominated the skies. For the soldiers and civilians, this was terrifying. Communications were often cut off, making it hard to know what was happening. Many people had to make quick decisions about whether to stay and fight or flee to safety. The roads were crowded with refugees and supplies were running low. The French and British forces did their best to hold the line, but they were stretched thin. As days passed, the situation became even more desperate. By late May, German forces had pushed the Allies back to the beaches of Dunkirk in France. It seemed like the end for the British and French armies trapped there. But then, something incredible happened. People came together to help. Hundreds of boats, from military ships to tiny fishing boats, crossed the English Channel to rescue the stranded soldiers. This became known as the Miracle of Dunkirk and showed how teamwork and courage could make a difference, even in the toughest times. In early June, France was on its own as British forces retreated across the Channel. By June 14th, German troops marched into Paris. France signed an armistice on June 22nd, effectively succumbing to German control. It was a massive blow, but the spirit of resilience and resistance lived on. Why does this matter today? The invasion of France and the Low Countries showed us the power of strategy and speed in warfare. It reminds us of the importance of unity and quick thinking in tough situations. Even when things seem bleak, human courage and cooperation can turn the tide. This chapter of history still teaches us valuable lessons about resilience in the face of adversity.